that up. I'm in the bathroom. I'm getting ready to go to dinner with my mother-in-law and her husband and my husband. And also we have church tonight. So we're going to go straight from there. And so while we're getting ready, I'm going to chat with y'all. A couple of things. Number one, my allergies are kicking my butt. I don't know what's going on. I haven't been doing apple cider vinegar in the morning as frequently, or maybe not enough. And so I am like really, my sinuses are just like draining, and I don't like to take Benadryl or Claritin or anything like that. So if you guys have any ideas, help a sister out, okay? Please. So I'm going to talk about homeschooling and my thoughts as a homeschooled student and as a former teacher, and talk about my thoughts on it. I know that homeschooling has become more popular as COVID kind of open up the opportunity for parents to homeschool. And of course, just if your ideology doesn't agree with a school, then yes, a lot of parents are opting for homeschooling. And so there's also this contentious, there's sort of this contentious energy around homeschooling, that I think teachers often have towards parents who homeschool. And I just want to talk about that and kind of how you can debunk that pretty well. So I'm going to talk about my own experience as someone who was homeschooled. And then I also want to talk about the pros and cons of homeschooling as a former teacher. I've had students leave my classroom to be homeschooled, and I have, sometimes supported that decision, sometimes not. That means nothing. Like, they do what they want, right? So it's not like I'm like, you can't go, it's just like, oh, I think that's a good idea. So for me and my seven siblings, so there's 8 of us, we were all homeschooled to some degree. So my oldest siblings were homeschooled up until about 8th and 9th grade. And then, if you just do the math, like how long everybody was homeschooled after that. My oldest sister is a mom. My second oldest is a math major. She is married with kids. My third sister has a master's in accounting. I am the fourth. I have a master's in education. I have 3 teaching credentials. Number 5 is currently studying biochemistry and is a researcher for UCSF. Number 6 is a PA. She is in the medical field. Number 7 is an engineer, and number 8 is going to med school at UCLA. So that is the rundown of my family. Hi. And as I said, I have 7 siblings, and we were all homeschooled. Now, one of the major contradictions and major points that are against homeschooling is that parents are not educated enough to teach. My mother did not go to college, and my father did not go to college. My father was a car mechanic, and then he ran his own business, and my mother homeschooled us. As I said, my mother does not have a college degree, and 4 of us have advanced degrees. We have one in med school right now. One's an engineer. One's in also studying biochem. The other one has a master's in accounting. The other one has her master's in public health. So that myth it's a very valid concern, in my opinion. If you guys want to know my honest thoughts, it's a very valid concern. Where I think that concern breaks down is me as an example, and lots of homeschool parents I know who are not necessarily educated but can still teach. And to be honest, up until about 5th grade, it's really basic fundamental things. What happens is parents, okay, I'm gonna keep it a buck, you guys. Some of these parents are not structured enough, and they themselves do not have the discipline enough to, I hate to use this word, force their kids to do their schoolwork. So what happens is you see all these parents who don't have degrees, like teaching credentials, and then there's this correlation between students not actually meeting grade level standards. And it has nothing to do with the parent education level and everything to do with the parents not implementing strategies and things in place where the kids actually are learning the material. So one of the concerns is, well, they're not getting enough reading time or math time. That's a valid concern. In our experience, we had a certain number of pages we had to complete every single day, and then we were done. And we were on a specific schedule based on the curriculum that we used. We were on a specific schedule and we had to make it through the entire year. And we figured it out. Okay, if I do 3 pages a day for each book, then I will finish right within the normal school year and I'll have a summer. If I finish early, then I have a longer summer, right? So some of the concern around parents not being educated more so has to do with parents not being disciplined enough or not having the structures in place for their kids to actually learn. So if you don't have a timer and you don't have, set things for everyone to do at certain times, yeah, your kids are going to be behind because they're simply not going to be doing the work. So I think that's a valid concern, but you can't blanket that statement onto everyone simply because someone does not have a college degree does not mean that they're incapable of teaching. Case in point, and I know several parents who were not college educated, but took the curriculum, took the online courses to learn how to teach the curriculum and then taught their children well. So you're talking about 2 completely different people when you think about parents homeschooling their kids. So you shouldn't demonize parents homeschooling for a subsection of students not passing. And this is where, when I was growing up, we had some exams that we had to send in to the publisher and to the, not the state, but we had some things we had to send in to demonstrate mastery of the content. I'm not so sure that that's still happening if students are not under a overall system. So one of the struggles is that if the parent, there's no accountability to the parents, meaning no one's checking on the student's grades or check for understanding, then yes, this whole thing falls apart very quickly. In our experience as a homeschooled student, we had 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock was math, 10 o'clock to 11 was science, 11 to 12 was history. Then we take a break and we go run, do a bunch of things. We come back and we finish it up. We weren't in school all day. If we finished early, we moved on to the next thing, but we had structures in place. The other thing is that our mother taught us how to read very, very young. So by the time we were in 3rd grade, we could read to understand. And that's something that doesn't happen. Again, you have to, as a parent, set your child up for success as a homeschooler by teaching them how to read early so they can start to read for understanding and reading to learn. And then after 3rd or 4th grade, we basically could teach ourselves. We could just read the book and understand it. And that was, I think, a major part of why we were so successful in homeschooling, is that we had structures in place for what we needed to do. And our parents, my mom specifically, held us accountable. And we had tests and we were to be graded on them, etc. My mother was what you would probably identify now as a tiger mom. I remember even when she did send me to school, she had me reading to her while I was doing her hair. We had to read the Bible, which you guys know is extensive vocabulary. People hate on the Bible, but I'm like, honey, a lot of these SAT words are in the Bible. You need to read the Bible. So we had to read the Bible. I had to read the Bible while she was doing my hair, and she would correct me if I didn't say the word correctly, and she'd make me read it again until I read it fluently and read it with the correct diction and intonation. And just to be honest, most parents are just not willing to do that. And my mother, she worked really hard to make sure that we were able to read. So just want to be clear about that. As a parent, it does require, in order for homeschooling to be successful, it does require just a lot of attention to detail. And that was one thing that my mother did very well. So it really had nothing to do with her not being educated and more to do with her willingness and dedication to helping her students, us, be successful. So I want to be clear about that, because there's a lot of this talk around, parents are not educated until they can't homeschool their kids. No, it doesn't really take rocket science to teach, but what it does take is discipline. And what it does take is dedication to the craft. And so if parents are simply not willing to do that, then yes, you're going to have issues. So that's number one. The biggest thing is not whether or not parents are educated, but whether or not parents are willing to have structures in place so that students can, their children can actually learn at home. And if parents are willing to put in that time for their students to learn at home, because it is time and energy and effort for them to do that. Okay. Another argument against homeschooling is kind of along with this is that kids are behind in homeschooling. I can tell you right now that when I went to school, after my parents did an excellent job of teaching us, I was reading it at the 12th grade level in 3rd grade. So in general, if homeschooling is done correct, kids are far more ahead than their peers. And the reason is that in public school, you are at the mercy of the dumbest, the least, I shouldn't use the word dumbest, but you are at the mercy of the least proficient student in the class. That's in general, that's how schooling works. So the teacher will always play to the average and not to the above average. So if your student is above average, they are going to be waiting on the teacher to catch everyone else up before they move forward. And oftentimes, if the student is not getting outside help, outside curriculum help, then they just tend to fall behind and go with the wave. So oftentimes it's the exact opposite, you guys. People are like, oh, your kid's gonna be behind. Oftentimes, if you're homeschooling, they actually do better because they're able to learn at their own pace. And if your kid is actually highly gifted, then they tend to do better at home because they can move past the curriculum very quickly and they're not stuck on the education system's idea of a pacing guide. So one of the concerns is that they're behind, and that leads me back to my first point, which is if they're behind, that's because the parents are not following the pacing guide, and it is up to the parents to do that. So while that's a valid excuse, it's not a byproduct of homeschooling. It's a byproduct of poor time management on behalf of the parents. The other thing in relation to being behind is that there's so many more homeschooling programs now than there were when we were growing up. When we were growing up, we shipped our curriculum from Abeka. So Abeka and Christian Liberty shipped our things, and we didn't have like a homeschooling cohort. Now, school districts are supporting homeschooling. They're sending kids home with the books. Kids are self-pacing through them. They're taking the same exams as the kids, as their peers. So there are just so many more options for homeschooling that does not involve parents being on an island by themselves teaching. There's also cohorts or like blended homeschooling that is really beneficial. If a parent can't teach a certain subject, she can send her, or they can send their kid to school for that particular class and then do everything else at home. So this idea that homeschooling is going to make your kid behind is really a misnomer. And it only applies if, again, the parents are not doing their due diligence. And so you do have to rely heavily on parents doing their due diligence when it comes to education with this. So that is the second thing that most people are concerned about, is their kids falling behind. Contraire, I say, we were far ahead of our peers when we were homeschooled. But I do have to give credit mostly to my parents because they really put us on that curriculum schedule and made sure that we were proficient in our subjects. And you can't discount that parents are not going to do that. Quite a bit of parents I know will do that, and they will support their children. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater and say that all homeschooling is bad, because some parents thought that homeschooling was going to be a piece of cake. And then they realized, oh, shoot, I actually have to teach my child how to read. Like if your child's in 8th grade and they can't spell, that means either your child has a learning disability or a learning disorder, or you did not do a good job of the fundamentals in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. The third concern is homeschoolers are weird. I've actually had this conversation recently with people. They think that homeschoolers are weird. And here's the thing. What they mean by weird is weird socially. Anybody can be weird socially. If you want my honest opinion, it's not just homeschoolers. What happens is back in the day, homeschoolers were sort of shunned by communities, okay? I remember being almost afraid to tell people we were homeschooled because they assumed that we weren't intelligent as a result, or that we couldn't learn as a result, or that we were somehow behind as a result. So I remember being fearful of telling people that we were homeschooled because it didn't have sort of there's a little bit of clout with it today. It's really this interesting dynamic where it's like, oh, you're homeschooled. Oh, they're either, you're too smart for school, so you're going to graduate at 16, or you're, a complete idiot. But now, we have all of these social programs. Like kids can do, okay, you guys know that I coach on the, outside of this, I do coaching. Are homeschooled because they're so good at their sports that they need to spend more time training than they do at school. So many So many. So I want to be clear that the social thing is only an issue if parents are not putting their kids in sports. You don't need to be at school to be socialized. I'm sorry, but some of the kids at school are, especially the teacher, I was very concerned with some of the behavior of students, just the influence. If I were to choose to put my kids in a social setting, it would not be in a school. Hands down, not in a school. It would be in a music class. It will be in a sports program, because those are sort of the positive behaviors that I would want my child to emulate, not the behaviors in a school. And this is where, if you're not a teacher, you don't understand how kids act in a classroom. I would not want my child around that. Period. So people being concerned that their child is going to be weird because they're homeschooled is kind of foolish. Again, this relies heavily on the parents, putting them in rec soccer and, having friends down the street or church groups or, people from all different walks of life. Like I said, we ran track. So there was a track club. We had church group. We went to the YMCA a lot, and we did a lot of sports at the YMCA. So that social piece really wasn't an issue. And I can understand the fear, but if, again, like I said, a lot of homeschooling programs now do have a social component where parents meet up and they go on field trips together. So homeschooling really isn't the same as it once was. So from a teaching perspective, I don't know that school is the place where I would want my kid to get social skills, to be honest, because you can get the same skills of learning how to shut up and listen, learning how to focus. You can get the same thing from a music class or a sports team, and so it's not as much of an issue as I think we think it is. Again, where the weirdos came in was people who never let their kids socialize with the world, because they were afraid of their children being in the world, and then trying to send them off to college or send them off to public school without having any understanding of what school is like. And that just takes a little work on the parents' part. It's just a little work. You just introduce them to the concept of school and you tell them how it is, and then you move on. Like, I didn't really struggle to integrate into school. If that's a choice that a parent wants to make, I didn't really struggle with that. I just kind of got on in there. So I know that homeschooling is a controversial topic. I know that people find it to be one of these abhorrent things. But I find it weird that teachers get upset about this. It's like, why the God complex of like, I'm the only one who's capable of teaching a child. It's like, we're actually not. like there's just, oh, is it time to go?
I just traded you on both phones too.
Oh, so my other phones are there. Okay, I'm coming.